All right, that's one chair turn. That's two chair turns. And we're at three chair turns. Okay, so we are going to go over the communication process today. So before we do that, though, we have to figure out what communication is. So there's a difference between communication and communications. I know that we kind of talked about this on the first day of school, but communications, that's like using media, technology things to kind of get your message across to numerous people. People that are in like ads and marketing. That's communications. Communication itself is just the process of communicating with either one other person, yourself, or a small group. But let's get into the next slide. So, how's communication defined? Communication is defined as a process. The field of communication grows as we continue to study how we process information. So, obviously, I don't need to tell you guys that as you get older, you learn more things, right? So you weren't born knowing that, a dollar is made up of four quarters. You have to learn that eventually, right? So as you learn more, you're able to communicate better. So as you learn things, you're adding it to kind of this like filing cabinet in your brain of all of this stuff that you already know. So that's your prior knowledge, and that's what's called schema, okay? So using, I'm going to go ahead and circle it really quick. So this is definitely a word that will appear again, maybe on quizzes or future notes, but all of our prior knowledge is called schema. So if you know how to shoot a basketball, it's going to be easier for you to learn how to shoot a free throw, if that makes sense. So if you know how to run quickly, it's going to be easier for you to learn how to run a mile. If you know how to write your name, then you will eventually learn how to write a sentence. So you're using your prior knowledge to build current knowledge, if that makes sense. Messages are sent and received through communication. Messages do not have to be verbal. They can also be nonverbal. So, for example, if you ask me a question and I go like this, I didn't say anything. My vocal cords did not move, but you still understand that what I'm saying is I don't know, right? So there really isn't. So any symbol or any kind of verbal form of communication still counts as communication. You can communicate with someone without actually talking to them, and I think that that's one of the most important things. Participants interact in social context. Context is the setting in which communication happens. That is another important point that might appear on a future quiz. Therefore, communication is always social. Now, whether you are willing to socially interact with others or just yourself, when you are talking to someone, you are at this point, you are thinking about all the things that they've gone through beforehand. When you talk to someone here at school and you're just introducing yourself for the first time, you're automatically assuming that they speak English. So if you walk up and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Right? For the same reason that we don't walk up and say, "Mucho gusto, ¿cómo estás?" Right? So we don't. We assume that people speak English because we live in the United States. And so because of that, the context in which that's taking place is going to make it so that we seem as though we already know what that other person is going to bring to the table. Now, if that other person doesn't speak English, then the context has changed, right? So you have to talk to that person now knowing that they don't speak English. The next thing is about meaning. So we have messages that are sent and received, and every message has some sort of meaning, right? Meaning is created and shared through the use of symbols. So symbols can be a bunch of different things. So, for example, think about the American flag. It symbolizes something to you, and it symbolizes something to me. Whether or not we have the same definition of what it symbolizes changes. So that makes it what's called a subjective symbol. Okay, so since it's subjective, you can change the meaning of it. Okay, some people are like, oh, well, it just shows that we have 50 states in the union. There's red and white to kind of show the freedom and also the blood that was sacrificed by soldiers, and then the blue represents peace. And so that's how one person might show it. Another person like, well, the flag to me represents the military, because when you are in the military and you pass away, you are given a flag by your senator or the president, depending on where you are in terms of your rank. But that's what it symbolizes to me, and so that essentially makes it a symbol for the troops. So both of those symbol definitions are pretty different, but whether or not they're correct or incorrect can't really be said. So that makes it a subjective symbol. Okay. So subjective symbols change with cultures, and objective symbols don't ever change. And then I use a stop sign as an example. It doesn't matter if you're in America or Germany or England or Australia. If you see some sort of red sign and it is put at the corner of a road, that is telling you to stop. Okay, that sign is never going to change. Okay, so if you see a stop sign in Mexico, if you see a stop sign in America, if you see a stop sign somewhere, that sign is an objective symbol. It will never change based off of what it exists. Okay, so subjective symbols like the flag are subject to different takeaways, but you can't really pull up on a stop sign and be like, to me, this just means go faster, right? So that's not how that works. So subjective symbols can change and objective symbols don't change. Let's move on. Let me get rid of that drawing first. Perfect. All right. What are the models of communication? So think about a model as a map. So when we first discovered maps and Christopher Columbus and all those people went around and they made maps of the world, as we traveled more, the maps got better. And as we continued to get more information, our maps got better. So that's the exact same thing with models of communication. It started very, very simply. And by the time we get to the newest model, which is known as the transactional model, we're going to see that it's changed significantly over time. So a model is a representation of your town. You can fill it with whoever's in the town. A model is a map of communication. You can fill it with the participants. So there were 3 models of communication. So the first one, the one that we're going to go over today, is the action model, or otherwise known as the linear model. Then it evolved into the interaction model, and then evolved again into the transactional model, which we are going to talk about, I believe, on Wednesday. So there were other models that kind of went in between the action and the interaction and the transactional, but those are the 3 that we're going to focus on. All right, so let's talk about the action model. The action model, otherwise known as the Shannon and Weaver model, is based off of Aristotle. If you have been in English 2, you know who Aristotle is. He is a Greek philosopher. He was very, very smart at his time, and he came up with the idea of rhetoric. I used to make my sophomores, because I used to teach sophomore English, so I used to make them repeat after me that rhetoric was persuasive language. Okay? If you are trying to persuade someone, you are using rhetoric. Whether you're trying to appeal to someone is based off of you're appealing to their logic or logos, or you're appealing to their emotions or pathos, or you're also trying to use your own credibility as a speaker, otherwise known as ethos. Okay, so using rhetoric means that you're using language that is persuaded right now to persuade your audience. Right now, you guys are listening to what I'm saying because I am a teacher. I'm using my own credibility established to convince you that what I'm saying is correct. Okay? Because you don't know this information just yet, you are willing to assume that I am credible in this information because I'm certified to teach this information, if that makes sense. The same way with your math teacher, the same way with your science teacher, the same way with your history teacher. All of those people have gone through the necessary testing to be certified to teach said subject. So therefore, they're using their own credibility or their ethos to persuade you. Now, there's other versions of ethos that we can talk about later, but the most important thing that I kind of want to circle back to is pathos. That's why there's so many good commercials. That's why there's a bunch of sad commercials, because people are emotional. When you can get someone to believe in your emotional appeal, then you can get them to do almost anything, as we saw last week. Okay. However, right here at the bottom, Hitler rose to power through his emotional appeals. He was able to talk to the German people and get them to feel some type of way about how they were being the ones that were being oppressed. They were being the ones that needed to advocate for a radical change. And so because of that, he was able to become one of the most popular dictators, evil fascists in all of world history. Okay, so he rose to power through his emotional appeals, and because of that, he was very, very good at using persuasive rhetoric in terms of pathos or an emotional appeal. Let's move on. So let's talk about the guys that came up with the model itself, Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver. Shannon was a mathematician at Bell Labs, where Weaver focused primarily on human nature. So he was kind of like a psychologist, I guess you could say. So a mathematician and a psychologists kind of work together, and they come up with this theory of how people communicate with each other. They wanted to find a way to make the use of telephone lines more efficient for transmission of voice. They worked with Weaver to come up with the mathematical theory of communication. They saw a source who sends a message through a channel to a receiver who decodes the message and sends it to the destination. So right now, when I'm talking, I'm the source, okay? Every single word I'm saying, every single sentence I'm saying is the message. The channel that I'm sending it through is through Zoom. So I'm communicating, I'm teaching to you through the internet. If the internet didn't exist, then I would literally just be talking to a box right now in a room by myself. So I would be insane, right? Or crazy. Well, I guess crazy is subjective, but the point is, I'm the source giving you messages through the channel, in this case, through the internet, to you, the receiver. Now, whether or not you can decode the message is based on how much you're paying attention. Also, if you speak English. Also, if you understand what I'm saying. So when I bring in other examples and you don't really know what I'm talking about, then that's going to be a little bit more complicated, right? So if I brought in like an example about the Avengers, or maybe like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or Star Wars, you might be more likely to listen to that because that's something that you are already familiar with. It's easier for you to decode that message when I use an example like that. Okay? So they saw that a source sent a message through a channel to a receiver, and the receiver decodes the message. Now, me deciding how I'm going to send that message, how I'm going to talk, that's what's called encoding, which we'll talk about more throughout the week. So this is a picture of the action model. It says that it's technology-based because every part of communication is technology-based. And so essentially, if no one had made the English language, then how could we communicate with each other, right? So therefore, since we are using the English language, we are using technology, even though it's very, very old technology. It didn't just exist. You can't walk around, the jungle or walk around the wilderness and find a language, right? It had to be created by someone. So it was created with technology. So to kind of explain how the process goes, let me draw some arrows. Perfect. So the information source goes all the way here, okay? To you, the receiver, being the destination. Me trying to get this information to you is essentially me working through that. Now, there is something that can stop the communication from happening, and that's called noise. Noise is anything that breaks or attempts to break communication. So, for example, if I'm speaking English to you and there's someone in the class that doesn't speak English or they don't speak English very well, that noise is going to stop them from happening. Now, noise does not just have to be a bunch of loud stuff happening, right? It is harder to talk to someone when there is noise happening, or like actual physical noise, but you can also have mental noise, emotional noise, and like spiritual noise. For example, maybe I'm in the middle of teaching a student and all of a sudden they start crying because maybe they got in a fight with their boyfriend, or they got in a fight with their friend, or something is happening that I don't really understand about. That's emotional noise that is stopping them from being able to really communicate with what's happening. So usually a good teacher will allow that student to kind of take some time to compose themselves, because they know that once that happens, they won't have as much noise, and so communication can actually take place. Let's move on. Oh, wait, that was it. We already finished. I know that we kind of went a little bit over, but I feel good about that.